Hello, folks. This is your Peachy update for the 6th. And we got peaches today. All right, folks, I want to talk about this whole thing with Pelosi and Biden and everybody else and all of this nonsense. We need to have a serious conversation about this because there seems to be a number of bits of misinformation, if you will, flying around, and Pelosi is promulgating them. She needs to be hauled out of the house in irons for this because she knows damn well she's lying. And it is one thing to politically lie because people do it all the time. It's another to do it in the context of trying to destroy the Constitution and destroy the country and start a civil war, which she is attempting to do. Now, I believe she's doing this because she's been backed into a corner. All right. I also have a theory as to why, which I'll get to right at the end. You're going to have to listen to the entire podcast to get it, or, I guess you could fast forward through. Please don't listen to it because the background on this is important. I got challenged both on my forum and through a couple of private emails about why I made a big deal about the extortion or bribery, whichever way you care to look at it, had an element and would be impeachable if proved. You have to understand a couple of things. Bribery and extortion, or blackmail for that matter, have a set of elements to prove the offense itself, that the act occurred. All right? So let's start with those. And that is, in order for you to establish that bribery, extortion, or blackmail, which are all essentially the same offenses, we're just talking about whether or not you're promising to give somebody something, you're threatening to do something evil to someone if they don't do it, or you're threatening to do something evil to someone if they do it. Okay, I mean, those are the three elements, right? I mean, that's the distinction between the offenses. In order for you to do that, there has to be consideration on both sides, and both sides need to know what the consideration, at least in outline, is. You don't have to necessarily know the specifics. But let's say that I go to you and I say, I want you to, you're the captain of the police force, and I say, I want you to kick my next door neighbor's door down and arrest him for drugs. And you say, well, I don't really have any evidence he's dealing drugs. And you say, well, he's dealing drugs. Trust me. If you don't do it, I'm going to publish a picture of you screwing a goat. All right, we've met the elements, right? I told you I wanted you to do something, and I told you what the consequence was if you didn't do it. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, I don't say I'm going to publish pictures of you screwing a goat. I say, I got some information I'm going to release to the press, and it's nasty. And that's all I tell you. Now, have I met the definition? Well, that depends on what you know. Let's say that you know that last night you screwed a goat, or 6 months ago, and you think to yourself, maybe he has it, maybe he doesn't. Now, I didn't give you an explicit threat, but I still have met the definition. All right? So this is the element that has to be there. The other side has to know, at least with enough specificity to believe that there is a threat. Now, he doesn't have to know what the threat is, but he has to at least believe that there is a threat that's being made, because otherwise you can't reach the threshold of extortion, blackmail, or bribery. All right? If I say to you, I want you to look into the corruption that I believe is happening in this place and the things that happened during the 2016 election, even if I name a person, I've made a request. Now, I haven't blackmailed, extorted, or bribed you. Whether or not I held up something, unless you have reason to believe that they're connected, which means you have to have knowledge that something was held up or withheld, you can't fit within there. Now, what you can say is that you think it's inappropriate for me to ask. But again, we come back to what I've said before on multiple occasions. No, it's not. You cannot escape accountability for your acts, whether they be criminal or not, by virtue of the fact that you've declared a run for an office. Otherwise, I can walk up to Nancy Pelosi and cold cock her right now, and then after I do it, turn around and declare that, by God, I'm going to move to her district. I'm going to run for her House seat, and you can't arrest me. You can't throw me in jail. You can't prosecute me because, by God, I'm running for public office. And I'm on the other side. I'm a Republican. You can't arrest me for this. That would be election interference. Oh, that's bull. Okay, that's the biggest cock and bull story that's ever been put together in history. It's nonsense. So we have that as an element. You have to have knowledge. There is zero evidence at the bar, zero, that Zelensky was in any way aware of anything either being withheld or promised to be either given or not given if he did or didn't do what the president had asked. None. You have a bunch of people who have testified that they think he did so. But from the other side, you have nobody who has testified or said in public that they believe that there was pressure put on with an element of something being either given or not given. In other words, there was no threat and there was no promise. So you can't, that dog just doesn't hunt unless you can get there. Now, let's assume you could prove that. Let's just make the assumption that there's a recording somewhere. There is an actual tape, or you have somebody on the Zelensky side of the House who comes forward and says, "Yeah, we had a parliamentary debate about whether or not we should go after Burisma because there's $400 billion worth of money that we needed to fight the Russians, and we'd been told by the Trump administration we weren't going to get it unless we did this." Now we got a different story. All right, now we got a different story because now we have the elements of an offense, but we still haven't established an offense. All right, and remember, the person who established these elements of the offense was Joe Biden. He did it in public. He admitted to doing it. And he also admitted that he got what he wanted. And then then they got what they wanted. So the bribery occurred and the payoff occurred. So we have Joe Biden who's admitted to this. That doesn't make it an impeachable offense, nor does it make it a crime by itself. Why? Because those things are done all the time in the interest of the United States. They're part of foreign policy, and they're legitimate. I don't care whether you like it or not. They are. They happen constantly. They happen every damn day. And what is a sanctions vote? Hello, people. You sanction some country or some group of people for doing. What is that? Stop doing this, or we're going to lock up all your money. Or we're not going to let you have a visa. Or we're going to, whatever. How many of these sanctions regimes have we put on nations over the 250 odd years that this country has existed? Dozens and dozens and dozens. It happens all the time. It's not illegal. Nothing wrong with it. So then we get to the next threshold question, which is the purpose of the event. The Democrats have alleged, again, without evidence, that the purpose of the event was to damage the person who Donald Trump fears most in the 2020 elections. And we have scolds all over the place who are saying, oh, well, the fact that he just wanted them announced, hey, listen, that's hearsay. There is no evidence at the bar that Donald Trump did that. There's no evidence. That somebody believes that's what he wanted doesn't constitute a fact. Now, if you could find that, you might have something. But number one, you have to get to the other second threshold, which is in the context of political corruption, which is what we're talking about impeaching somebody for. You have to have had the act take place, and then it has to have been for an improper purpose. In other words, not for the benefit of the United States. I don't think you can get there from here. Because, first off, that President Trump believes sincerely that the Ukraine attacked him during the 2016 election cycle is an established fact. There's only been, 4 years worth of public record on this? Of course he believes it sincerely. Otherwise, why would he have made the charge all the way back to the whole thing with Hillary and her emails and CrowdStrike, which, by the way, that's a tenuous link at best, but doesn't matter. We're not talking about facts because the facts haven't been developed. What we are talking about here is why would the action have been undertaken in the first place? And if it was undertaken because Donald Trump believed that there was a problem with corruption and he was safeguarding the spending of public funds, which he is not only entitled to do, he's required to do, and it doesn't matter whether some scold in the national security apparatus or in the State Department says, oh, yeah, they're doing all their anti-corruption things. That's not good enough. Okay? The President of the United States, as the head of foreign policy, with a delegated power in his pocket from the Constitution, specifically under Article 2, has every right to say, nope, because I have evidence that is sufficient in my mind that that's not true. And again, foreign policy is almost, not entirely at a plenary level in Article 2, but it's pretty damn close. All right? So in order to do that, in order to make the case that this is impeachable, you have to be able to show that, number one, that it happened, which we don't have any evidence of. All we have is people who think it did or believe it did. And if they're animated by political animus, then they don't have to cite any facts. All right? We've had Republicans repeatedly ask the witnesses, including these four that were just in front of Nunes. Not Nunes. The Judiciary Committee. We've had these four that are just there who have said, we're asked, do you have a single fact that supports any of these allegations that you have personal knowledge of? Not one of them put their hand up. So we have no facts. But then the next question is, if we developed the facts, which could form the basis for an article of impeachment, what was the purpose? And you have to be able to get there. Now, in order for you to demonstrate that, you'd have to demonstrate two things. Number one, Joe Biden is a credible, realistic threat to President Trump's reelection in 2020. The statements of the Democratic Party, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, clown that claim. Multiple members of the Democratic caucus, including the Speaker of the House, have essentially said we can't beat Donald Trump at the ballot box in 2020. They have admitted that Joe Biden is not a credible threat to Donald Trump in the election. This is very important, folks, because in order for you to make a charge that somebody did this for the purpose of winning re-election, in other words, for improper purpose, that's a valid basis for an article of impeachment, you have to first make the argument that the person who he targeted could unseat him. And the Democratic Party does not believe that's true. The protagonists of this do not believe it's true. Doesn't matter that Donald Trump doesn't think it's true. He said that more times than you can count. Nobody on the Republican side takes Joe Biden seriously. Sleepy Joe and all the creep show stuff and everything. No one on the Republican side of the aisle takes Joe Biden seriously as a presidential candidate. But the problem is neither does anyone on the Democrat side. Nobody thinks he can beat him. Barack Obama doesn't think he can beat him. So, in fact, there's a clean argument to be made that if you knock Joe Biden out of the race, Trump's actually in more trouble rather than less. That there is a greater probability that Elizabeth Warren can beat Donald Trump in the general than that Joe Biden can beat him. So, we have a problem here with credibility of the charge. But there is another issue that comes up, which is projection. And this is very important because it seems to be happening time and time and time again with this caucus. And it's why I argue that they're actually trying to start a civil war. They're trying to provoke people into doing it. When I watched that hearing, if that was the only thing I had, boy, that was a damning portrait of the President of the United States. Well, it's not the only thing I had. Those witnesses flat out lied. They flat out lied to Congress and to the American people. They did essentially what Stone is now facing 50 years in prison for. And they did it at the behest and at the demand of the Democrat Party. That is crazy. That is the sort of that is a literal act of insurrection within the Democrat Party of the United States of America. That's nuts. And if you were listening to that and you had that was your first exposure to all of this, you might very well think, well, they don't get this guy. I'm going to go pick up a gun and I'm going to, yeah. Hey, let's not go there, guys. But that, that's the sort of thing that it might evoke in you. It was that far over the line. And why do I say projection? Because it is projection. Remember, we know that Joe Biden committed the first element of an actual offense and that he committed an act of extortion. He didn't just try it, he got it. Okay? Call it blackmail, called extortion, whichever you feel like. The essence of the offense is the same. He's admitted to it, there's no question. Now, the question is, was it for improper purpose? Because if it is, then he not only did he commit an impeachable offense, we ought to impeach him before he's elected, so he can't take office, because the second part of impeachment trials, by the way, is that you can also get by a simple majority, once you've been impeached and found guilty and removed, you can be barred from ever holding an office for profit within the United States again. There's a second vote that has to be taken for that, but it only requires a simple majority. We ought to do that up front. We ought to think about actually having him arrested for sedition. Why? Because everyone from the Democrat side, the entire left-leaning media, and this is the part at the end that I told you had to wait to hear, believes that this is about whether or not Hunter Biden committed a crime in being on the board in Burisma. In other words, did he do something illegal? It has nothing to do with that. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. I have no evidence that Hunter Biden committed a crime. It's not against the law to hire somebody because you think they have a cute name or because they're associated with someone. That's not illegal. It's highly unethical in many cases, and it's but do you think it doesn't happen all the time? Why do you have all these celebrities that were on the board of Theranos? Did the people who were on the board, did they commit a criminal offense by sitting on the board? Of course not. Now, if they were aware that the company was falsifying data, that's a different story. But I'm not going to go there because it appears from all evidence that we have in public that the things that Burisma did to obtain those leases happened before Hunter Biden was on the board. Therefore, he would not have been involved in those decisions. Therefore, if the charges against Burisma are related to their illegal leases, claims that their holdings are not lawfully acquired, Hunter Biden didn't cause that to happen, and therefore he can't be indicted for it. However, as I said, that doesn't matter. If, in fact, the company was investigated and those leases were found to have been illegally acquired, the correct remedy for that is for them to be revoked. Well, oil and gas companies have to have those leases in order to be able to drill and extract oil and gas. Without the right to drill to get the gas, you have nothing. So if the Ukrainian government investigated this and found that these leases were illegal, the odds that the company would collapse immediately approach 100%. It is essentially certain that Burisma as a corporation, as a going concern, would disappear. And it would happen very rapidly. In fact, it might happen immediately. And what does that mean? That means that Joe Biden's son loses his $50,000 plus a month salary. There's your personal animus. There's your personal reason to threaten to have a prosecutor fired or you don't get the $1 billion. And again, it makes absolutely no difference whether or not Hunter Biden did or did not do anything illegal. It makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. It is the reason, however, that no government official can ever have somebody who they are affiliated or associated with, and certainly not a member of their family, sit on the board of a company if that corporation comes under investigation that could lead to a heavy sanction, and God forbid, that could lead to its dissolution. Because by definition, any act you take to tamper with the outcome of that investigation or how it proceeds or whatever have you, you have just violated your oath of office and you've committed a criminal offense. You've misappropriated public funds for private purpose. That is theft by conversion. It is exactly what the Democrats are charging President Trump with without evidence. And yet, on the Democrat side of the aisle, we don't just have evidence, we have proof. Because the fact that Hunter Biden was being paid $50,000 plus a month is factually established. The fact that Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in loan guarantees unless the prosecutor who was investigating the company was fired is a fact. These are not disputable. The first is admitted to. The second, we have documentary proof from when Archer was put on trial. And so the actual act that the Democrats are charging that President Trump engaged in without any evidence to back it up has in fact been proved for Joe Biden. Now, you want to know why this constitutes an incitement to civil war? Well, excuse me? You have a man who has, by the Democrats' own definition of what they believe the president did, disqualified himself for office in that he would have to be immediately impeached and removed before he ever took the oath. That person can't run. And yet, on the other side of the aisle, you have a set of allegations, the same allegations that have been factually proven for Joe Biden, that have been made against Donald Trump. But they haven't even established that the event, the predicate for an improper action occurred. In fact, there's no factual evidence to support it. Why is it that this hasn't been laid out this way by the people on the Republican side of the aisle? You want to know why? I'll tell you why. Because I'm willing to bet that there are plenty of people over there who also benefited from Hunter Biden getting that thing closed, or Joe Biden getting that thing closed out back when he had the prosecutor fired. What other investigations were going on at the time? I don't know. But you know what? Do you think that there wasn't benefit on both sides of the aisle? Of course there was. So where is Pelosi going to go with this? Why is she screaming so loudly? Because she knows if this thing goes into the Senate in a fair process and all of this comes out, there are going to be so many heads that have to be chopped off that there might actually be a shooting war. And so she's going to violate every principle of basic process, due process, and I suspect she's trying to clown the investigation to the point that when it goes to the Senate, they dismiss it. And that way it all stays under wraps. And you know what? Whether or not she gets away with that, I don't know. But there is a very real risk that on the left side of the aisle, if it goes that way, they'll erupt in violence. So, you got everybody backed into a corner here. But the root of this, and the reason this is so damned dangerous, has nothing to do with now. It has nothing to do with the upcoming elections. It has everything to do with the fact that all of us in this country have sat around with our finger up our butt. We let Black Jesus preside over this nation for 8 years, and we did absolutely nothing about the corruption that was going on in the Ukraine, our intentional interference in their foreign affairs and their domestic affairs, which, by the way, is nothing new for the United States. But then, on top of it, we have allowed ourselves to become so divided against this idea of country that you can gin up stuff like this and nobody in the press will bring up the process facts that are behind any of this. No one. Because if you did, before this all started, we would have had to put a stop to it. We would have had to say, oh, there's no there. Sorry, wait for the election, try to vote him out of office. But you have such a weak bench on the Democrat side of the aisle, they can't accept that. So they're going here. And my guess is Speaker Pelosi was essentially issued a threat that if she didn't go along with this, she was going to lose her gavel. Someone was going to bring a no confidence vote, try to eject her from the speaker's seat, which they could try to do. And rather than take that risk, she went along with it. And now realizing that there's nothing behind this. By the way, the Judiciary Committee never got the transcripts, all the basic stuff, which they have to have before they, I mean, that's original jurisdiction. I could spend another 20 minutes on that. But they never got that stuff. So now, recognizing that she's got 2 6-off suit and a jack, and somebody else looks like has a full house, she's going to clown the process on purpose so the Senate dismisses it. You watch. That's what I think's going on. Let me ticker guy. And that's how it is, folks.